Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Podcast Digest. My name is Dan Lizette. This is episode 132. Thank you again for coming back and joining me for another extremely special episode of the Podcast Digest. I'm doing a couple of things with this show this week that I've never done before. So I'm going to tell you all about them in just a second. But first, as I like to do, let me take just a moment and thank a couple of very special people. First, all my Patreon supporters, the few, the proud, the wonderful. If you are interested in helping support this show, as little as $1 a month can go a long way to making sure this one-man show continues each and every single week. Link in the show notes if you're interested in doing that. And also like to thank this week's show sponsor. My friends at Podbean have been wonderful. They are back again, continuing to support the Podcast Digest. If you are a podcast host and you're looking for maybe a new home for your show, or you're thinking about starting your own, Podbean offers podcast hosting and monetization, the easiest way to start podcasting. Podbean.com/TPD to learn more and get your first month for free. Now, on to this week's show. I mentioned doing some things I've never done before. First, you guys have probably already figured out, my guest this week is not a podcaster. This is the first time in a very long time that this person is not on a podcast, doesn't write about podcasts, doesn't, any of those type of things. This gentleman is an absolute sensation on YouTube. His name is Austin Evans, and if you are a fan of technology like me, into phones, into computers, desktop builds, into gaming systems, into all the awesome technology that comes out all the time, you need to be subscribed and checking out the work that Austin Evans does over on YouTube. It's amazing. I've been watching him for, 7-8 years of his nearly 10-year run, and I asked him to join me this week, and something that I hope to become a regular occasional feature here on the Podcast Digest. I find that there's been a lot of similarities between a great podcast host and creator and a YouTube creator. They're all creatives. They're all trying to tell a story. They all have a system and a process that they go through to put together the final product. So I think there's a relationship here in terms of the behind-the-scenes stories that a great YouTube video creator can share as well as podcast host. So I hope you guys like this change of pace. If you do, let me know. I want to hear about it. You can go to thepodcastdigest.com. Yes, I said .com. For those of you who weren't aware or don't follow me on Twitter, as you should be doing, @PodDigest, I am now utilizing the .com domain for the Podcast Digest, thanks to a revamp with my host. So you can go ahead and check the podcastdigest.com. There's a contact page on there. You can shoot me a quick email, come straight to my phone, and let me know if you really enjoyed this conversation with Austin Evans. But before we even get to this week's conversation, I'm going to do something else I've never done before, and that's peel back the curtain just for a moment and let you know about next week's show. Next week's show, episode 133, I've got a gentleman going to be joining me to talk all about the first season of his amazing show, a part of Gimlet Media. The show is called Heavyweight. The host, as you may already know, is Jonathan Goldstein. And he asked if he could join me just for a quick minute this week to tell you about something going on in the world of his show, Heavyweight. And so let's get to that right now. Hey folks, as I just finished describing to you, we're going to hear from our guest for next week on the Podcast Digest, who wants to share something with you right now. Jonathan Goldstein from Heavyweight. Welcome to the Podcast Digest. How are you, sir?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for having me. What I wanted to say was that we're looking for stories.
That sounds good. Are we looking for a particular type of story?
Well, yeah, so in season 1 of Heavyweight, the stories focused mainly around my friends and family. And the premise of the show is a deep dive into people's pasts to try to resolve or remedy or reconcile some moment from their past that they find has reverberated through the years and affects their present. So, for example, in one of the episodes, we went, my father and I attempt a reunion between my father, who's 80 years old, with his brother, who's 86. They had stopped speaking like 40 years ago. In another episode, I help a friend of mine to accomplish his father's dying wish involving his cremated ashes, and he's been carrying these, this urn around in the trunk of his car for like decades. So for season 2, I'm looking to try to help other people that I don't know. And that's what I was seeking your help with.
Excellent. I'm sure there are people out there who've got stories like that to share. If they do, if a light bulb just went off into someone's mind, Jonathan, how can they get in touch with you and Heavyweight?
Okay, so they can write to heavyweight@gimletmedia.com. And so the idea is just like, if there's a specific moment that you wish that you could return to undo or to do over, and you think about it a lot, and it's this kind of misgiving or regret that you're schlepping around, maybe it's something that I can help you with on the show.
And I've just come across that email address as well as sort of a little description of the type of information that you would like listeners to provide. And I'll make sure that link is in this episode's show notes as well as next week.
That's really great.
Well, Jonathan, I can't wait to talk to you more about season 1 and some of those amazing stories that you just described. I explicitly remember at a time talking about one of the episodes, and I'm going to have to go back and look in my tweet history, being absolutely one of the best pieces of audio I heard in 2016. So I'm very anxious to speak to you and learn more about the show, and we'll pick this up next week.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I'll try to, I'll do my best to try to, I don't know, explain the magic.
Well, I'm sure folks are going to be looking forward to that. And folks, if you've got a story, those links are in the show notes, and reach out to Jonathan, and maybe you will be featured in season 2. So thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate it.
So there you have it, folks. My very brief conversation with Jonathan Goldstein from Heavyweight in Gimlet Media. If you have a story that might fit with that show, reach out to Jonathan. There is a link in the show notes where you can tell him why you think what your situation was might be a great story, or if Jonathan can give you a hand in reaching some resolution about a situation in your past. So there you go. And look for more next week. Tell your friends, subscribe to the show. I'm going to have a full-length interview with Jonathan Goldstein next week right here on the Podcast Digest. But back to my brand new episode this week, the completely new type of guest from YouTube, Austin Evans. Let's get to my conversation right now. Hello, folks. As I mentioned up front, you guys heard I'm trying something new this week and really excited to open up this new chapter of the Podcast Digest with my first YouTube guest. Austin Evans, welcome to the Podcast Digest.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, man. This is a lot of pressure being the first.
Yeah, and I explained to folks up front that one of the things that I really am intrigued by is, how creators do what they do, and more importantly, the what goes into it behind the scenes that most viewers or listeners never see. And so I've been a YouTube fan forever and been a subscriber to yours for about the same amount of time. I'm a huge tech fan. Most people know that. And I'm really anxious to talk to you about what you do.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
But I tend to open these conversations with this, and that is before YouTube launched, before you started YouTube, I believe in August of 2007. Can you tell folks a little bit about yourself before your first video ever launched? What was the young Austin like? What were you kind of have in mind for your future? What was the old days like?
I mean, the dream was to work at Best Buy. The Geek Squad had my name all over it from like the age of 13 on.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. So when I was younger, obviously before YouTube even really existed, one of the big things I was really interested in was actually writing. For a long time there, probably until I was like 16, 17, my plan was I wanted to be a published author. So I spent all my time writing stories, and I had a few friends who were into it, and we would all kind of like compare notes and try to be all pretentious and cool together writing our books. But then YouTube came along and kind of upended the whole thing. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, man, it's crazy too, because it went from like being such a huge part of my life to honestly within like a month or two of like focusing on YouTube, like that was the last time I had ever really written. Like I've tried a couple times to pick it up since then, but it's crazy just how much it went from like being a huge part of my life to something I don't even think I could do it anymore. Like I've tried, and it's just like I feel like I've just lost that part of me and replaced it with a bunch of video editing and whatnot.
Well, let's jump into today's stuff. I've done my research. I've heard a lot of your previous interviews and conversations conversations, and a lot of people have already done a real good job of sort of documenting your early days and so on and so forth. So I don't want to rehash all that. Let's talk some other stuff that maybe you don't traditionally talk about. So when you talk about writing, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was a lot of your videos, especially in recent years. Is it safe to assume that by and large they're scripted? And if so, is some of your writing coming through in that maybe?
All right, so I love hearing that. So yes and no. For a while, actually, my very first video that was on YouTube was scripted.
Wow.
And yeah, so part of the reason I did that was before I actually made my current channel, the reason I even got interested in YouTube and even interested in making videos, period, was I was trying to adapt my stories into video form. So what I would do is, super rudimentary these days, but I would basically take the text and put it up on screen and then I would read it. So it was almost sort of like a sort of ghetto audiobook that I was trying to put up on YouTube. So that was kind of where I learned the very sort of early bits of video editing as far as, making like stills and, putting it all together and everything. So by the time I actually started making tech videos, I had maybe 6 or 7 of those sort of prototypes under my belt. So it was not a crazy sort of leap to kind of go to continue to script my videos and kind of continue to script sort of what I would say on camera. For a couple years there, I sort of got away from that and just did free form of, hey guys, blah, 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 this is a phone, this is whatever. But then for a solid, I'd say probably like from 2011 to last year, almost every video was scripted. I'd say 90% of them were fully scripted. And what I would do is I would write the whole outline and kind of evolve that into a script. And then for the bits of on camera, I would just script that too and just memorize it. So I would sit, down in front of the camera. I would, give my lines to camera that were actually live. Then I would sit down, read the script. Then it comes to a point where I have to look up the camera again. I would read that line. And I would just have it memorized to the point where, I was clearly, running off of a script, but I wasn't running on a teleprompter, so it sort of looked natural. So that was the way I did things for a long time. But last year, we started to sort of expand. So I don't know if you know Ken, but Ken is the amazing, amazing video guy who changed the channel forever, and I pretty much have not been scripted since. So that was a big change.
How's that been?
Amazing. It was good in a lot of ways, actually. So one of the things that I was realizing was I was becoming very dependent on the script, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing, because I do think there's something sort of clean about a script. I feel like it's sort of like the most pure essence of a video when there's not a bunch of extra fluff. It's very much to the point. And if you really want to get the maximum amount of information into 2, 3, 4 minutes, I feel like a script is still the way to go. But the thing is, there are a few things that sort of influenced the change. One of the big ones was just YouTube algorithm changes. So I know every YouTuber ever likes to complain about this, and it wasn't really an issue for me, but I think it was something that I recognized that if I was able to make longer videos and still make them entertaining, that would definitely be something that would be helpful kind of going forward. And I think on top of that is, sure, some people can do it, but I was never one of these people who were talented enough to make a script that's also as entertaining and as exciting to listen to and to watch as something like, me opening something out of a box completely unscripted and just, having a good time, right? I think it's really difficult. Anyone can, watch a movie and say, oh, that was written terribly, but it's really difficult to sort of write natural lines. Whereas if you just turn a camera on and you sort of be yourself, I feel like a lot of that stuff just kind of comes naturally. So I think there are a couple of major reasons why I wanted to make the shift, but yeah, no, pretty much everything. I think every once in a while there's like, a few bullet points or a couple of, things I have to remember to mention, but I have not run on a script in, probably over 6 months now. Does
it feel more satisfying at the end that you've portrayed a more realistic sort of representation of your reaction to an unboxing, or just felt more conversational with the audience? Has it felt better doing it this way?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of advantages. I think, you absolutely nailed a big one there. It feels more natural. It's easier to kind of make a quick little joke that, normally I would, immediately cut or wouldn't even think about. But, you're in the moment, you crack a couple jokes and, all of a sudden you're editing and go, hey, wait a minute, that was actually kind of funny, and you leave it in. Or in most cases, I leave it in and it's not funny, but, you learn. Yeah. But something else that was also really helpful is kind of building that relationship with the audience. With the tech side of YouTube, I think that there are a lot of people who do a really good job, but I feel like it's easy to kind of get into I don't want to say a boring, monotonous place, but I feel like it sort of naturally leads you there. I think sure, some tech that we talk about is exciting and interesting, but a lot of it is sort of decent. It's sort of okay. It's not really the most exciting thing in the world. And I think it's easy to sort of make a 5-minute video explaining all the ins and outs of a product without any passion, without any excitement. And I think that was something that I was very much sort of falling into the trap of. And so by switching to live and sort of being way more conversational and getting excited and sure, being over the top sometimes, I feel like I'm able to sort of better portray my, this is going to sound really bad. This is my like journey through technology. It's awful. I hate it. But like, you know, like it's a cool thing. I still get excited when I get to open a new box and see some cool product. And, you know, maybe I get to play with it for 20 minutes and as soon as the camera turns off, I'm off to the next thing and I don't get to play with it again. But at least I have that moment where I'm on camera and I'm like, oh, look, this thing comes with some crazy cable or, you know, it pops out in some different way or it's some interesting thing. I love, obviously you unbox enough things, you kind of get the idea, but I love being able to open something up and being legitimately surprised. And that's something you completely lose when you're doing more of an analytical review, it's scripted, and it's very much coming from the point of this is information you need to know. Whereas nowadays I feel like my videos are much more like, wait, what? It does that? Really?
It's almost like infotainment.
Yes.
Sort of exactly. That term. Right.
And I think one of the big things, sorry, not to cut you off, but
no.
I think one of the interesting things about the change to the video format is that I think you really nailed it. It's not just about teaching people. I think entertainment is now just as big, if not a bigger portion of my videos, right? Because think about it, like I am fortunate enough to be in a position where I get to take a look at all kinds of crazy expensive technology, and that's great. But obviously, people are not going to go buy every single piece. Like back in the day, a lot of my views would come from people who are legitimately about to buy something, right? So maybe I do a video on an iPod Touch and people find it in the search because they're, you know, it's in that Amazon cart and they're just waiting to hit the checkout button, but they need a little bit of reassurance. But these days, people come to the channel just to see cool tech, right? So sometimes it's sort of affordable, but a lot of times it's not. And so it's a sort of different way of going about it. Not a lot of people are going to buy a $3,000 computer, but everyone can appreciate some crazy overkill gaming rig. So I think sort of positioning the content in more of an entertainment side, I think has been sort of helpful in keeping people interested in not just always coming back, you know, every 6 months when they need a new phone, but when they actually just want to see some cool stuff.
Well, and one more point on this idea of moving away from the script and sort of getting that more natural interaction in there. Something that I've talked a lot about with my audience in terms of podcasts is I tell people all the time that I think people come for the content, but they stay for the hosts. And yes. I believe that. And I would imagine that it probably applies to YouTube as well, right? So you're going to draw in a tech audience because you're an established name in tech. But there, as you well know, I don't need to tell you, tons of people doing tech at this point and more than ever every single day. But they're going to stay because they like that interaction and that kind of, the style that Austin brings to it. And I think that's, one of the, probably, tell me if I'm wrong, one of the best benefits of this sort of format change you've made.
100%, man. 100%. I think it's just so helpful to be able to sort of build that relationship with the audience. I think people like Linus actually do it really well in that not only does he have a great personality, well, okay, don't tell him I said that. He has an okay personality. But not only does he sort of combine the personality, but he also combines it with a format that's able to really kind of crank videos out every day, right? And I think there's something powerful about that a lot of us in the tech space, in fact, I feel like Linus is probably the number one example of someone who can really keep up with the daily upload schedule and do it well, right? So I know so many people will wake up in the morning and the first thing they do, they're eating their cereal or whatever, is they watch a Linus video. And I think there's something powerful about sort of building that habit. You know, you look at pretty much any sort of like daytime TV show or like talk show or anything like that. It's sort of like built into people's sort of routines. If I wake up, I watch the news or whatever. And I feel like that's something that I would love to be able to get to if I could crank out that many videos with that kind of frequency. But Linus also has hired like half of Canada to help him, so that's
right. YouTube has certainly changed, and not just in viewership, and but in the way that videos are being produced. And it's one of the things I don't remember when I first started subscribing to you, but it was probably back in 2009, 10, maybe somewhere in that window, And I think I was one of those ones that kind of found Marquez really early and then immediately went out to anybody he ever mentioned that did tech. You know, one of those. I think that's how I found Lou. That's how I found you. That's how I found Jonathan, so on and so forth. It was just like the spidering out from there. And I've been subscribed to all of you guys ever since. But one of the things that I want to ask you about in terms of change, watching, I've been a tech junkie forever. Watching tech YouTube is awesome because it's tech. It also ends up being the first place that I think a lot of viewers see a lot of new toys, tricks, methods of production, and so on and so forth. And I think you guys are kind of blazing the trail where a lot of other creators kind of come behind you guys and sort of adopt some of those methods. So I'm curious, in your opinion, in these almost coming up on a 10-year anniversary here, Austin, in these almost 10 years that you've been putting out videos, what are some of the pieces of tech or even in process or assembling these that you felt have really contributed the most to either your personal enjoyment or success?
Man, there's been so many things over the years. I mean, I think probably it was 2010, 2011 is when everyone started switching to DSLRs. I think that was a big one because I know my first camera was, I had like this little Kodak point and shoot I shot with for like 2 months, but I had this like little Sanyo Zacti camera. In fact, I think Marquez just did a video on it. He was the reason way back in 2009 that I actually bought it because he got it and I was like, yo, dude, that looks awesome. You got like zoom, it looks like a taser, sign me up.
Right.
So that was one of the things that I think really sort of helped elevate the production was just having the sort of shallow depth of field. And obviously everyone sucked and was terrible back then and didn't know how to use them. But I think that was sort of one of the first things that started to define the tech look, right? And now, you look all over the place. Large sensor cameras are everywhere, and it's not a difficult look to achieve. But I think that was one of the big things. I think also the fluid head. I think it's something that, most people would never think twice about. But you think of a tech video, especially back in the day, you think of those silky pans. It's going left, it's going up, it's going down. And that was all those Manfrotto fluid head tripods. I think everyone got one within like 6 months. And it was just like, it just blew up everywhere. And I think just thinking back to, obviously these days, pretty much all of us are using crazy over-the-top equipment that, we could totally get away with not actually using. But I think it's just funny going back to some of those like smaller things. And, if I was starting a channel today, I mean, I see a lot of people sort of falling in the trap of, hey, Marquez shoots on red, I need a red, or hey, I need this $4,000 slider, or whatever. And I mean, it's great when you have these tools at your disposal. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm going to go throw all my nice stuff in the garbage, but it's not necessary. I mean, the other day we actually shot basically an entire video. In fact, actually, we did shoot an entire video when we were in San Francisco for the AMD Ryzen launch. We shot the entire thing on a Sony a6300 and a $200 lab that I kept in my pocket. Like, that was the most bare bones rig we had used in a while, and no one said one word about the quality. It was completely fine. I think that just kind of goes to show that it's easy to sort of get yourself in this place where you need all this crazy gear, but it's not really that like necessary when you really consider that if you have good content, everything else kind of follows.
Yeah, now phones are shooting 4K, I mean, everything's becoming more and more accessible. People may already have many, not all, but many of the tools they already need to at least put out something decent.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I think you completely nailed it on the smartphone side, right? I mean, the smartphone that you have in your pocket is way better than any camera that I had access to for years when I started my channel.
Right, right.
Like, I remember even when I got my first DSLR, it didn't even have manual control over video. So, like, if I wanted to get a shot and I didn't want the exposure changing everywhere, I would, like, point out the window to get the rough exposure, then I would lock it, then turn it back and go, oh, no, not quite right. I would, like, point at, like, the wall, or I would do whatever I could to just sort of get it roughly in the ballpark. Whereas now, you can download an app and change absolutely everything on your smartphone. It's going to look way better. Man, it's cool.
Amazing what's in our pockets nowadays. It really is, especially when you look back. It's amazing what we're all carrying around.
It's insane. Yeah, I mean, exactly. Then we've got like 4K. I mean, I think especially the iPhone, like the video stabilization is crazy good. So smooth.
It's insane.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, like I said, I think it's easy to fall in the trap of more gear is better. And of course, the fancy toys in life can definitely help sort of up the game on the audio side and the video side and all that kind of stuff. But I think just a lot of people sort of put the cart before the horse and forget that you don't need all this crazy gear to make good videos. You need to make good videos and then get the gear to sort of justify that.
But one comment on gear I really want your take on, Austin. I am convinced Philips Hue changed all YouTube videos forever. Yes. I'm convinced of this.
100%, man. And I'm pretty sure John was the first person to really dive into Hue.
Yeah.
I think of maybe Marquez is probably pretty early too. But yeah, Hue has been interesting, and I think that combined with the large sensor cameras that could shoot at higher ISOs and in lower light, I think has really sort of changed, like you said, the look of tech videos. I think it's so easy to get some crazy backsplash, that all, of course, all like the small lamps and stuff. It went from a thing where, you get the standard YouTube $100 softbox special on Amazon, and you get a bunch of light and it all looks kind of gross and blown out. But now it's easy to, you pick up a couple Hue bulbs, and all of a sudden now you can actually add some really sort of depth and some color, and you can really sort of customize the look to whatever you want, not just trying to throw a gel over a softbox or over a little sort of LED panel or whatever. So yeah, I totally agree. I think Hue has been a huge, huge change. And of course, now there's crazy stuff like sky panels and just insane. But
and there'll be more. I'm sure there'll be more, and I'm sure you'll have videos to cover it when all this stuff keeps coming out. We've talked around and mentioned a little bit some of these people that are also in the tech space, and I know you're extremely good friends with many of them, collaborators with many of them, and we could kind of go through that history and story again. I know you've told to it, but I want to kind of suss out just one particular element. One other YouTuber that you have worked with maybe the most, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems, at least if I see it the most, and it seems to me that you guys are super cool, and I kind of want to know a little bit more about the history of you and Jonathan Morrison.
I was wondering where you're going with that. John and I have been friends for a long time. I feel like I met him it was a CES, man, it was like 2011 or 2012. It was one of those very first trips. And actually, it's funny. I remember, I was totally fanboying when I met him, because at the time, he was not number one, but he was definitely up there. And he was one of these guys who sort of came in a little bit later than most of us, but he came in with this nice gear and super creative and, completely blew away everyone at the time. No one was even close to John back in, 2011, 2012. Of course, we've all passed him 100% by now, so don't worry about that.
We will tell him that. We will tell him that piece, yes.
But, I remember he was putting together a little dinner for some tech YouTubers who were at CES, and he invited me. I was like, me? Really? And I remember being super excited, and I got to go meet a bunch of the guys and stuff, and it's been fun. I think there are definitely some funny moments from back in the day that I probably shouldn't mention right now on the podcast. But
it seems like you guys work together a lot. Yes, you guys how often do you guys see each other?
Pretty much, maybe not every day, but all the time. We have our offices in the same building.
There we go.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a thing where where he was just he's shooting a video right now. I was just harassing him 10 minutes before he got on this podcast. It's nice, and I think there's a big advantage in sort of having not necessarily just a collaboration partner, but just someone to sort of bounce ideas off of. I mean, I think especially here in the office, it's nice to be able to you have some idea and you're like, hey, I think this is great, and have 5 people shout you down that you're a moron. That's helpful, right? Because I would rather be shouted down by my colleagues than put up a video that everyone hates and does terrible, So a lot of that stuff I feel like has been almost more valuable than even the collaboration aspect.
That's awesome. And that sort of leads great into what I wanted to talk about. You are now a West Coaster, but not always. You weren't originally, right?
No. So I grew up in Missouri, which was a super exciting, fun place full of nothing at all. It's not cool.
The tech hotbed that is Missouri. Yes. Hey,
man, Soldier Knows Best was from Missouri, so I got one on my team.
You've got that, yes.
Yeah, so I should have moved out to LA a lot sooner than I actually did. For the most part, I just kind of kept putting it off because it was not only just a big move, but it was so much more expensive. I couldn't get over. If you couldn't tell, Missouri might be pretty low on the scale of how expensive it is to live.
Right. Yep.
Whereas LA is not crazy, but I mean obviously it's quite a bit more than I was paying back there. But I kind of liked sort of being in my own little bubble and being able to kind of keep my head down and just work. I remember I had a couple years where I lived in an apartment, and there would be days on end where I just wouldn't really leave the house, or maybe I jump out for a Taco Bell break, but I knew I had to kind of finish a video or finish a project or something. And, I got a lot of good work done. I think those are some of the more valuable time that I actually spent on my channel, because that was sort of those days where it was really sort of make or break to whether I was actually going to be able to pull this thing off the ground or not. But I kind of got over the hump, and then I realized, you know what, I just need to come out. I was traveling out to LA multiple times a month. I remember I was I think the month I decided, I think it was like June 2015, I was out in LA like 5 times in like just over 4 weeks. And I was just like, I can't do this. This is not something I can keep doing. So yeah, I said, screw it, found a place, made the move, and been happy. It's been nice.
Well, I'm sure CES is going to move to St. Louis at any point just because of you, but
oh man, that would be so great. Just flip it right back.
You know, wouldn't that be good? And now you're sitting out there, I really need to go back to Missouri, but I just don't know if I can do it. Who knows? It might happen. Anything can happen, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
Let me ask you this. We talked about sort of, we've talked about your physical relocation. We talked about sort of the changes in tech in the video. But here's another thing that I bet you don't talk very often about, and I'm curious about, in that you didn't just grow a video channel and an audience. And folks, as we're recording here at this point, he's about to cross 2 million subscribers. I know you've been checking on this, Austin.
Oh man, I'm so close.
Almost there.
So close.
By the time this episode comes out, he might be there at 2 million subscribers. and the total views, I don't know, you're encroaching up on 300 million, almost there.
That's a crazy number.
Isn't it insane? But while that's all happening, something else is happening too, where you're also learning and getting a crash course on, and that's running your own business.
Oh.
And I'm curious about what that life has been like for you over these almost 10 years.
Yeah. The first few years weren't bad. So I started my channel when I was still in high school. So back in those days, I remember I got my first AdSense check, which was like $160, and super excited. And I went out and bought like a Nintendo DSi with that money. But yeah, as you might imagine, the scale is a little bit different these days.
Sure.
So not only do we have an office, but I have someone, Ken, works with me full time. We bring on part-time people when we're working on bigger projects and stuff. And yeah, the business side is probably my least favorite part of this whole thing, honestly. It's just a lot. I think it's just a lot to keep up with, and I think it just sucks up so much of my time that I either am neglecting all these important emails, or my lawyers contacting me, or there's this or that. Like there's all these things that are always kind of piling up, and I usually sort of neglect it to the point where it's a big problem, and then I'll spend 3 or 4 days trying to sort all the stuff out. So yeah, that's definitely been one of the more sort of challenging things of transitioning, because I never really thought through like what it actually would mean to be somewhat successful. I was just kind of like, make more videos, get more subscribers, the end. But obviously there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah. And then the first year of tax returns, you're like, oh.
Yeah. That was I remember the first time I had like a conversation with my accountant. I was like, okay, so I've been doing this for like a year or two. I'm super excited. And he's like, okay, well, so you owe a very, very large amount of money. I was like, oh, all right, I have to pay that, don't I?
You're like, we might have to do things different next year.
Yeah, so it's been a weird transition, man. I feel like I was unprepared for it, but it also was a thing where I was lucky enough to kind of find some good people to sort of help guide me and make sure that I wasn't being a complete moron and getting arrested or something.
And going back to sort of this tech community, these people we've been talking about, be it Lou, be it Marquez, be it Jonathan, this is sort of a generation kind of experiencing this at not maybe the same moment, but similar moments. Have you been kind of able to kind of bounce things off them, get a recommendation on, hey, this lawyer or this accountant, what do I do here? Have you guys kind of been supporting each other through all that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Linus is probably one of the big people who've actually been very helpful. I remember I had a conversation with Linus like the first time I met him, probably 2013. And it was just when he had sort of broken off and started his own channel and left NCIX. And I remember he was like immediately like, hey, you need to hire people. You need to grow and expand, and you can't be doing everything yourself. And at the time I was like, man, you're crazy. I can do this. Maybe way down the line I might want to, try to expand somehow. But I was like, no, this is it. This is all me right now. And he was like, all right, whatever, I told you. And now, in hindsight, I absolutely should have listened to him. That would have been some really helpful. It would have been nice to be able to start building the team earlier, so I wouldn't be at the point where I'm at now, where I still get to work on videos and I still get to work on stuff, but there's also just this giant pile of just daunting terribleness that's always, in my inbox or in my mailbox, or is always something I have to do, and it's always sort of in the back of my mind. So I think that was sort of helpful. And yeah, like you said, I think especially people like John, who, he sort of went down the business route and started expanding and everything a little bit earlier than I did. So it's been helpful to kind of be able to talk to him and kind of see what his process is. And I think in vice versa as well, I think some of the contacts that I've made have been kind of helpful on his end. And yeah, but it's definitely been it's been an interesting transition. That's for sure.
Do you think you're done yet, or do you think there's still a few more pieces you need to add organizationally, so to speak, like a business manager or somebody to maybe take some of this off? I'm thinking to myself, if you're at like 80% of your time on the business side, that percentage is only going to grow as you continue to grow, and then at a point, maybe you don't have enough time for videos. Is that right? Something you're considering?
Yeah, so right now the team has grown a little bit. So I do have a manager who helps, but that's mostly on sort of like the sponsorship side, which is that was literally the very first thing I ever gave up. I remember I used to do like sort of like the smaller sponsors back in the day, and it was not the smoothest experience, mostly because I had no idea what I was doing. That was probably one of the smarter decisions kind of early on, was sort of handing that part of the business off. But no, you're totally right. I think that's something that ideally this year that I sort of get sort of more under control. Thankfully, my time, it's not anywhere near 80%. It probably should be a lot higher, but it's manageable right now. And especially since we've got our own space and since Ken has joined, I think it's really kind of helped speed up the production. And also switching to the live format was really helpful, because back in the day when I was, be spending all this time, playing with the product, then I would outline, then I would script, then I'd shoot all the B-roll, then I would edit, even if I was going completely all out and taking no time off, whatever, it would still easily take 2, 3, 4 days to work on a video. Whereas now, Ken and I have kind of got the machine nicely well oiled, so we can easily, well, I don't say easily, but it's definitely possible for us to do an entire video start to finish within a single day. And that's really sort of helped free us up so that, maybe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'll bust out 2, 3 videos, and then the rest of the week I can catch up on all the terrible business stuff that I've been dreading for the last week. So
I can hear the dread in your voice, Austin. I really can.
Can you tell that I have 180 emails in my inbox right now that actually need to be replied to, not just spam? I'm looking at the number in my doc right now, and it's
not pretty.
Not pretty.
Well, and what's funny is that, I listen to a lot of tech podcasts, obviously, in addition to the tech viewing I've done on YouTube. But what I hear a lot from some of the tech podcasters, David Sparks and Jason Snell over on Relay FM, specifically, they're of a show called Free Agents, in terms of working for yourself. Those are both previous guests here on the Podcast Digest. And one of the things they've been talking about recently on their show is the idea of virtual assistants. And, in terms of kind of farming some of this stuff out and to a virtual assistant, is something like that even maybe a potential for you in the future?
Maybe, yeah. To be completely honest with you, I haven't given it a ton of thought. I've been able to kind of sort of bump along and kind of keep my head above water for long enough that it's always I'll figure that out later. I don't know, though. I think I'm sort of in the mindset of I kind of want to build a local team. I feel like it's nice to have people, in the actual office. And now that we do have, honestly, we probably in this office, we could fit at least another 2 people, really comfortably. So I think my head's kind of probably closer to that side of the equation. But yeah, it's easier to put off and not think about. I'm
completely understand. Well, I'm going to make you stop thinking about it after one more question.
All right, go for it.
One more question on business, and then actually I want to talk about offices and talk about some of these spaces that a lot of the tech community has gotten into, because it's awesome. Hey folks, let me jump in just a quick moment, tell you about this week's show sponsor. It's my longtime friends over at Podbean. They are back again this week, and I'm very appreciative. And this message is for you if you are a podcast host, maybe looking for a new home for your show, or if you are a super fan like I was back in 2014 and thought about starting my own show, you need to consider Podbean on your short list of those that will host your show. And let me tell you why you should be doing that. First of all, it sets you up with an awesome website. and you can customize all the themes and colors you want. You're going to be able to integrate really easily with iTunes, set up all the RSS stuff you need. You can import or redirect the show if you've already got a particular host set up. You're going to have access to applications for both iOS and Android. You're going to be a part of their online directory. Go check out their website. They're promoting shows all the time. You're going to be a part of that. That's going to help your show grow. Of course, you're going to be able to share out to the social sites automatically. Social is such an important means of finding your audience for your show, and they're going to have quality embeddable players for you when you do. Let's say you already have your own website. Podbean can integrate into that as well. Comprehensive statistics, Podbean's got you covered as well. Stats are a big deal. What country they come from, where are they coming from, what day did they listen, so on and so forth. Podbean's got you covered with all your statistical needs. And like I say, when you want to take your show to the next level, what do I mean next level? Let's say you want to start monetizing some things, maybe some special episodes or featuring advertisers, or maybe even reaching out to listeners directly and asking them to support you as the podcast host and producer. All those tools are available through the Podbean platform. So tons of reason to check them out. Best yet, there's a link in the show notes, folks. If you go to podbean.com/TPD for the podcast digest, TPD, you're going to get all this information in writing, explore the site and their offerings even more. And if you go to that special URL, you'll get your first month for free. No risk. And all the reward is possible with Podbean. Check them out. And my thanks once again to Podbean for supporting the Podcast Digest. Now back to more of my conversation with Austin Evans. On the business side, one more thing. I noticed something last month on Twitter that almost blew my mind, speaking of business. And I was like, Austin Evans is doing a promotional announcement for McDonald's? What? Does it get any bigger than that, dude? I mean, that's freaking amazing. Okay, high school Austin has got to have like his mind blown at this point. I mean, don't disclose anything you're not supposed to, but how does something like that even happen, man?
You know, it was funny. So, so like you said, I went out to Chicago and I did an announcement for McDonald's. Essentially, we were kind of spoofing an Apple event, so it was kind of very over the top and dramatic, but you know, it was sort of a fun sort of poking fun style event. But yeah, basically they have a new shake and they designed this straw, which is just insanely over the top, right? Like it's got like they actually had like legit like aerospace engineers. Like I know like when they said it like on the call and they're explaining this whole thing, I'm like, oh, okay. But then like I met the guys and they're like really legit. Like one of the guys, like or actually a couple of the guys worked on like Project Aura and like helped design the Kindle. I mean, these guys are like insane.
I wondered what happened with those Aura guys.
Yeah,
after Google buried it. Well, they went to McDonald's.
Like no joke. Those guys are absolutely the ones who designed the straw. So it's crazy over the top. And they basically wanted someone to kind of host the event and kind of make it a little bit more fun. So they called me up and I was like, yeah, that sounds like fun, I think. At first I was really confused. I'm like, why me? This sounds really weird. But they sort of gave me the pitch. I was like, oh, right, yeah, I can do that. I gotta say that was my first event like that. And I don't want to say I was crazy nervous, but there were definitely some nerves involved as far as, you know, having like a live audience, and we did it all on Facebook Live. So, you know, we rehearsed and of course, we, practiced and, I went over the script and all this kind of stuff, but you only get one chance, right? I mean, not only could, there could be a Facebook Live issue, there could be an internet issue, there are all these moving pieces, and to kind of pull off a live production like that was stressful, to say the least.
I just got to think to myself, if I'm you, I mean, like the night before you fly out to do that, aren't you pinching yourself? Like, am I about to do this big live event for It's one of the biggest companies in the world.
Yeah, man. It was crazy.
It's so cool.
Yeah, no, it was. And you know what? The best part was everyone was super, super cool. And I'm not just saying this because they pay me or whatever. Like, really, like they were such cool people to work with. And even though, of course, it's, any kind of production like this gets stressful at certain points, but the entire crew was cool. Everyone from McDonald's was cool, and the entire experience was smooth. It was way smoother than I was expecting. I've done maybe not something quite like this before, but I've done sort of like, sets and, commercials. And I've worked with sort of like these larger productions, and almost always inevitably there's, something I'm like, great. Well, I didn't sign up to do that, but whatever, I guess I'll do it. Or, there's always these sort of points where I'm like, well, I guess I'm in too deep now. I can't really say anything. But with this, it was super smooth. It was super simple. They were like, just go out there, do you, kind of have fun with it. And yeah, I don't know if you actually got to see it, but we had like a couple really minor technical difficulties, which I look back and go like, no, the rehearsal was better. But overall, I'm really happy. And it was just a fun experience. It was so cool to be able to do something like that. And I'd like to think it didn't go too badly. I was pretty happy when I actually finally watched, because, you know, we did a bunch of rehearsals. We were trying to, you know, obviously iron out like all the camera movements and make sure I wasn't talking gibberish half the time. And you know, there's all kinds of new things for me. Like I had like a producer in my ear. So, you know, I'm like walking down the stage and getting like sort of, you know, he's like, okay, now turn left and, you know, look up and, you know, just all the little, like, don't forget to mention this and all that kind of stuff. But it was a really cool experience. And I'm super, super happy that I had the opportunity to actually go out there and do it and not make a complete fool of myself.
Man, Austin, maybe that was one of them, but maybe there were several more before. What other intervals or crossroads in this journey you've been on where you've kind of had to step back and be like, is this really happening? I can't believe this is happening.
Oh, man, there have been a lot. I remember probably the biggest was, it was actually the launch of the Samsung Galaxy S3 all the way back in 2012. So that was the first time I had ever been invited by a company to go attend a launch. And, you know, at the time, I think I probably had like 20, 30,000 subscribers. It wasn't like a huge channel, but I guess it was big enough to sort of get Samsung's attention. So they flew me out to New York, and I remember it kind of, you know, as a kid from Missouri, it kind of blew my mind. I had never been to New York before. I immediately, like, I arrive at the hotel. 30 minutes later, I've met Marquez for the first time. We're hanging out. There's like these high-level Samsung executives at the dinner. Like Guy Kawasaki shows up. He's sitting right beside me. I'm like, what world am I in? How is this even? I will never forget. That was the craziest contrast of my life, going from, you know, waking up in Missouri and, you know, hanging out with my dog who like made a giant mess and like tore the garbage up and stuff, to ending the day, you know, at this beautiful rooftop restaurant in the middle of New York City with all these amazing people. You know, we went to Times Square that night. Like it was a really super special moment. And I don't think I'll ever top that, just of how crazy different it was to have that kind of experience. So that was by far the biggest one.
Now, your memory is probably better than mine, especially of that evening. That was not the event with the crazy stage show that people were talking about for years. That wasn't that one, was it?
No, that was the Galaxy S4 launch. Yeah, I was at that one, though. That one was also fun and exciting.
Different?
We'll go with different.
Yeah, different. Boy, that one was talked about a lot. And now you're sort of a regular. Recent videos, I've seen you've done stuff at Switch with the AMD we talked about earlier. I mean, you kind of, this is sort of a more or less regular thing for you, yeah?
Yeah, thankfully. It's funny. It was not, I guess it has been, but it doesn't seem like it was that long ago since, you know, I wouldn't be able to get, you know, anyone to reply to my emails, or I would ask for this and they would go like, oh, well, sorry, no. Or, you know, it was a constant sort of thing of getting shut down. Like, oh, you're a YouTuber. Sorry. Let me try to connect you with someone who deals with, you know, online media. And it used to be a real struggle back in the day. And of course, I think a big part of that was my channel just wasn't as big as it was. But there also just was a real lack of respect for YouTube, which is understandable. I mean, we hadn't really earned it yet. But it's been really, really encouraging to see, especially in the last like 2 years or so, that, you know, YouTubers being invited to major launches, and, you know, I've been able to do like factory tours, and I've been able to, you know, go and check out these cool R&D facilities and check out products that are legitimately early, right? It's not like come to our launch event, but it's like, hey, here's this unreleased, unannounced product a week early, play with it, prep a video, and you get to be the one who announces it. It's like, whoa, this is a huge change.
You guys are practically reporters now. It's almost not even YouTubers per se. You're almost tech reporters in a sense.
And yeah, in a lot of senses, I think you're totally right. And I think especially as companies have sort of come around to the idea of the sort of reach that YouTubers have, I think it's sort of easy to kind of just, you know, brush it off as, oh, whatever. But when you look at, you know, Marquez does a video on, you know, say the new Pixel, and, you know, obviously millions of people are going to want to watch that piece of content. I don't know what, you know, the page views on a CNET article are, or The Verge or whatever.
Exactly,
but
right.
You got to imagine it's in that same sort of ballpark. And I think the companies are starting to sort of realize, oh, wait a minute, this is a really big thing that we should be paying attention to.
And not to put you out on the record or anything, but we live at this time as we sit here in early March of 2017, and this has really been this way for a while, but it only seems to be getting more and more attention when it comes up. There are a lot of thoughts on the YouTube world from some of its biggest creators. And in terms of, I don't know, revenue sharing, the advertising program, how Red works and so on and so forth. A lot of comments all the time. And then just this week, YouTube announced, that they're getting into the streaming TV market. In your experience, as a participant, who you're not the biggest in the world, but you're definitely no small fry anymore. You're in there. You're in that about to be 2 million. What's your experience been on the whole, in terms of now this being your career, it's your lifestyle, so to speak. It's your lifeblood. What's your level of satisfaction with YouTube? Do you think they could be doing things better, worse, or are they about right?
I think they're about right. I think there are a lot of people who like to complain, and I think a lot of the complaints are justified. YouTube definitely has issues, and I think they can be sort of slow to not only just respond to issues, but I think there also can be sort of, I don't know, I feel like I've spent enough time around sort of like this sort of corporate version of YouTube and kind of seeing how it works on the inside. And it's a big company, right? It's a very big company. It's sort of hard to get momentum in one way, then another way. And of course, there's always the Google overlord who jumps in and says, hey, we want you to do this every once in a while. So I think there's always sort of a thing that you kind of have to contend with, that, hey, this is not your platform. You kind of have to be okay with that. But that being said, I think YouTube does an amazing job. I think it's insane that even after all these years, it's hard to kind of think of another sort of place that you would want to not only just watch videos, but upload videos, right? I mean, everything about YouTube is still free. And it's crazy that, I think people sort of get to underestimate that. Like, oh, it's YouTube, whatever. It's kind of there. But, I mean, just the sheer, cost of running a site like YouTube. I mean,
oh, yeah.
Ungodly. Just the amount of bandwidth alone is insane. And so I think when people complain about, oh, YouTube takes too much of our AdSense or this or that, it's like, guys, do you have any idea? I wonder if I hosted my videos for a month with the same views. I mean, I've got to talk about tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of bandwidth. And YouTube provides all of that for free. I think that's something that it's really easy to sort of overlook, is just the sort of service that YouTube provides, not only for, large creators, but, I can tell my mom, hey, upload that video to YouTube. I want to take a look, right? It's not like some huge over-the-top sort of media corporation. It's something that really anyone can access. And I think that's a huge, huge advantage. There have definitely been plenty of issues. I think there have been some fairly major missteps that have kind of happened on YouTube's side as far as different initiatives and whatnot. But generally speaking, I think they realize they have a good thing. I think they realize that YouTube is. I really do think YouTube has the staying power that a lot of the other sort of social networks and things have kind of popped up and fizzled out. I just think that YouTube has sort of hit the critical mass that it's not really going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah.
And honestly, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I really wouldn't.
Well, that to hear you put it in those terms, probably the most rational take I've heard, and maybe that's just in media clips and people only focusing in on the negative takes or what have you. And maybe what you just explained is, more or less the prevailing thought process from most creators. But that makes complete sense, everything you just explained there. I've got one big topic left that I want to cover with you, Austin, and that is, of course, while YouTube plays a big hand in making a lot of what your life today is possible, there's also another huge element, and that's all the viewers and all the, I think it's fair to say, Austin Evans fans out there. And I'm curious, what has the experience been like interacting with them, and not necessarily the comment section, although that's a thing I'm sure, but especially in person, at some of these events you go to? What's that aspect of your life been like?
It's still weird and amazing. I mean, I don't know, it's cool. I mean, anytime, I would say 98% of every person I've ever met in real life has been super cool, super awesome, really, really, it's cool to see people in real life. And I know that sounds super idiotic and dumb, but you think about it, all day I look at analytics, I look at numbers, I look at, spreadsheets and charts, and oh, look, viewership's up in Q2 and blah, 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 whatever. But it's a whole other thing when you get one person, 5 people, 500 people in a room in front of you, and you go, wait a minute. All those numbers I see on those analytics, these are real people. These are people who actually care and are giving you 3 minutes of their time a day, right? That's a crazy thought. And I think that as much as I sort of pretend to get used to it, every once in a while I'm just like, wait a minute, that guy just said hi to me. he just asked to take a picture because he watched one of my videos. What? That's a thing? Like that still just hasn't really fully sunk into me yet.
What's the story of the first time in public somebody ID'd you?
It was actually kind of early on. So it was back at Playlist Live 2012, which is one of the very first YouTube conventions down in Orlando. And I remember I was sitting in line to check into the hotel, and someone was standing behind me. I didn't really pay any attention to them. And then I walk up and, I check in. And as I kind of step back, this girl kind of stops me and was like, I like your videos, and then walked off. Like, she was standing in line that whole time just to say those 2 words to me, and then just like stepped away. I was like, what? I didn't even know how to react. It was such a bizarre thing. And now, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it always makes my day when like someone like recognizes me or something. Like the other day, like I was walking across the street, and 5 minutes later I checked Twitter, and someone is like, hey, I think I just saw Austin walking across the street here. I'm like, what?
How often are we talking? Let's do real talk. We talking once a week, twice a month? What do you think?
It depends. I would say usually a time or 2 a week is pretty normal. Yeah, it depends on what I do. I think,
right.
Certain places there are a lot more fellow nerds than others, but
Best Buy. You should go to a Best Buy.
Man, it's actually
I bet
funny.
that's terrible for you.
No, it's great. No, actually, so I'm not gonna call anyone out here, but last time I was in a Best Buy, we just had some time to kill, so we were just kind of walking around, and I got talking with a rep who was had on the camera section, and I was talking about the the A6500 and the RX100, which are new Sony cameras that were out, just kind of talking. Well, a couple Best Buy employees came up, and they're like, "You're Austin." I was like, "Oh yeah." So like they conspired. There's like 5 Best Buy employees over in like a corner, and they come over like, "Hey, so you want anything? Can we help you out?" And I was like, "I was just looking at this RX100." They went in the back and they pulled out this open box unit. It was like $300 off. Like, here you go. I was like,
nice.
Okay, yeah. I was like, this is awesome. Yeah, I would totally sign up for this deal.
I'm just my memory's jogging here, Austin. Wasn't there was it a you, Marquez, and Jonathan video in a Best Buy a couple years back? You guys took a trip to a Best Buy for something?
Oh man, we
I think you were somewhere at a conference or something, and you had to go to Best Buy for something.
CES, yeah. I think it was a Lou video. I know because like we had one CES where we all sort of stayed together and we all kind of hung out the whole time.
Yeah.
I feel like we were trying to find like an Ethernet adapter.
Yeah,
so
I remember a cable. It was something. Yeah.
Yeah, so like we spent like half the day like trolling through Las Vegas trying to find this single Ethernet cable, and oh man. It's like those are sort of like the fun moments, because I think we've all gotten so much busier since then. Like we used to be able to hang out and do that kind of stuff all the time, and now it's the sort of thing where it's like I'll see Marquez and Lou and Jedner like every couple months or so. But I remember back in the day we would be able to hang out for like a whole week at CES and do all this kind of stuff, and now it's like, oh hey man, how's it going? Okay, I'll see you next month.
Well, now when you guys hang out, they're stage events.
Oh my god.
Right? If I remember correctly,
that was a thing. Yeah, we did a thing in LA. I guess it was last January called Team Crispy Live, and yeah, you're totally right. We had like 500 people in the audience, and we did a live show, and it was a lot. It was so much more work. Sort of like just trying to put that thing on, not even like the show itself, but just all the logistics of trying to take this dumb idea that I had and trying to make it into an actual show. It was so much work. But man, that moment we walked down stage and there's like 500 people giving us a standing ovation, I was like, what is this even? Like I couldn't even deal with it.
Let me tie up with this, Austin.
All right.
Most ridiculous video making memory yet. And let me tell you the reason I'm asking that question, because I'm wondering if it couldn't have been this past Valentine's Day. I mean, watching that thing on the whole time, I'm like, what am I watching? What is that at least top 5 in your career at this point?
That's an easy top 5. Yeah. So for some context, basically, I had been talking with the people over at Tender. So they had created this Tender VR headset at CES, and essentially what it is it's basically like a big cardboard box. Obviously, it's plastic; it's nicer, but it's essentially a box with 2 sort of like head goggle straps on either end. And while they call it Tinder VR, what it literally is you and another person put it on, and you're just staring at each other's eyes. There's no technology. There's no anything. It's literally as if like you and someone else are holding a shoebox that has the ends cut off, and you're staring at each other. I thought this was hilarious. I was so excited. Like, this is great. It's such an on-point joke. I love it. So they ended up sending me the headset. And then, like, I got it, and I was like, wait a minute, what am I going to do with this? I remember I had a moment there, like, man, maybe I shouldn't have done this. Like, what is it going to be? But I ended up, so my friend Kat, she was like, yeah, sure, I'll be in the video. So she came over, we put the headset on, and it was, I don't think disaster is too light of a word to put for it, but it was.
I think it was great. She played the part perfect.
So well.
And delivery.
So
it was
well.
great. And then how you guys just kept switching venues, and I'm thinking to myself, this is amazing. They literally went all over town with this thing.
We absolutely did. It was like one of those things where like it seemed like a good idea, and I kind of kept putting it off. I'm like, okay, we'll shoot, like the day or a few days before Valentine's Day, and it'll be this whole thing. And like I kept putting off, like, oh, we'll figure something out. We'll figure something out. And it's literally like 30 minutes before she showed up, and I'm like, so what are we gonna do with this thing? And it literally was like, we shot the unboxing, like, okay, what now? And so we just started walking around. Like, there's actually a few parts of that video that ended up getting cut out where we were trying to walk with it. And it was so ridiculous. Like, I couldn't even put it in the video. Like, we're like tripping over each other. Like, people are walking and like yelling at us because like we're in the sidewalk, like looking like a couple morons. Like, it was so much fun though. Like, I feel like it's important, especially as I kind of try to keep the channel fresh and interesting, to do goofy new stuff sometimes, right? Like,
no,
sure.
I thought it was great. With you both trying to drink out of the drink, that pretty much nailed it. That was the punchline at the end, and I was like, oh, that's just classic. That was it was great. And what's funny is I'd love to see, because you could stay in a box. You could stay in the tech lane only and just like you say, unbox, spec list, you should buy, not buy, end video. It would be easy to just keep doing that, but now you're in like a new generation. You're like you said, the change you made a few months ago, and you're constantly looking ways to keep things fresh. And I think that's what keeps people subscribed, honestly.
Man, I hope so. I really hope so. Because, yeah, it's like one of those things where it's easy to kind of get sort of caught in by the numbers, and you look at, oh, look, I'm getting more subscribers. But like realistically, subscribers don't really mean a whole lot. What all that really matters on the subscriber number is how many people actually watch the video. There are plenty of people with millions and millions of subscribers who get almost no views, right? But I think it's sort of the thing where, in my head, I feel like if someone skips 2, maybe 3 videos in a row, they've essentially unsubscribed. Right, not only just because of the algorithm and how it kind of sees, like, if you watch content, it sort of like gives it to you, and if you don't like it, then it won't show you more of that. But just like sort of mentally speaking, like I think of people who I watch on YouTube, and if I skip a couple of your videos in a row, that's probably not a good sign they're going to watch a lot in the future. So in my head, I always kind of keep that. Okay, look, I can always sort of experiment with a video here and there, but generally speaking, I want everyone to tune in to at least every other video, if not every single one. And to do that, I have to kind of get creative. I have to make sure that it's not going to be stale, not going to be predictable. I want people to see something in their subfeed, go, wait, what? Click. Like that's the goal. That's the goal. And so I want to be able to do that and also follow through with sometimes, useful consumer advice, and sometimes walking around the middle of the city with a Tinder VR headset on, whatever works.
You know what? Just on that whole, you know what the thing is? Here's the thing. There are the whole crew of tech YouTubers that we've been talking about, and more that I've subscribed to. I mean, there's ones I haven't even mentioned. Mr. Mobile and Pocket Fit. What iMore's doing, and Mobile Nations, all this stuff. I'm subscribed to all of it. CNET, everything. I am a tech junkie. I don't watch every video, and there's one reason, and I'm wondering if other people have this problem as well. You know what my issue has been? Oversubscribing. I am subscribed right now. I'm looking at this right now to 122 channels.
That's a lot.
And so what that means is, if I don't keep up with it, right? So, if you put out a video twice a week, means if I don't hit it at just the right number, I can tell you right now, I have 82 unwatched videos because CNET releases a 90-second video 5 times a day.
Right.
And the problem is, now I'm looking at my first, my just general scroll before I hit load more. I've got 2 days. Only 2 days worth of video right now looking at my subscription page because I've subscribed to 120 plus channels. And I'm wondering if that could be something a lot of people have done. They've oversubscribed, so it's so easy to miss stuff.
Absolutely. I think personally, I try to keep that subscription list as minimal as possible because, like you said, I don't want to be able to miss these people. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to clean it up. Or notifications, right?
Or notifications, exactly. Yeah. But like, I can definitely sort of see like the back end analytics on my own videos. And I completely think you nailed it because when you look at it, it's super easy to see that a video will get almost all of its views, right? So an average video in the first 12 hours is pretty much done, right? Like that's going to be the vast majority of the views from subscribers. And after that, it trails off really quickly. So it's like day 2, you think, oh, there's still going to be some people watching, but it's usually like a 10th, maybe a 20th of what it was doing in the first few hours. So I think it's very much a sort of thing where, of course, something new comes out, people are watching, but once it gets down that sub feed, a few hours, a day or so, it's pretty much buried.
Yeah, and I think it's because people are getting into it more. YouTube's a lot more mainstream than, say, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. People are relying on it more and more for it's on so many set-top devices now. I watch it more on my Roku than I maybe even do on my iPad, which is saying something. Yeah. And I keep finding more and more. I'm looking here just to give a few people call-outs, and I'm sure you're familiar with many, if not all of these people. Some of my more recent Tech Me Out. She's killing it in the tech space. I just found her through, you may also like, Omar Correa. I found him recently, and there's a couple others that I've subscribed to that has just been like sort of just filling up my feed. I mentioned Super Saf. I know he's been around forever and is big, but I just came to him recently. So it's just clogging up my feed. And so I will occasionally, for a lot of people we've talked about, like you and Lou and Marquez and Jonathan, I will randomly click on you guys and say, did I miss anything last week? And then I'll come back because it happens. It has happened. I'll own up to it.
So I think the best way of thinking about this, and this is a little bit like YouTube, like inside baseball, is that the subscribe button, it depends on how you use it, I guess. Because I think if you use the subscription page, you're always going to see everyone you subscribe to. And that's the way that I typically use YouTube. But most people, like I don't have an exact number, but based on my own videos, I would say probably 60 to 70% of people actually watch from the homepage. And from the homepage, that's completely up to YouTube's discretion. So that's really where that algorithm sort of sets in and it decides, hey, have you skipped a couple of these videos lately? You probably don't care about the next one. Whereas if someone uploads maybe like once a week and you catch every single one of their videos, you better believe that that's going to be very, very close to the top anytime they upload some new content. So I think that's something that YouTube, and again, I think this is one of those sort of criticisms that a lot of people have, and that, the sub box doesn't work or people aren't seeing my videos. But I think a lot of that is sort of a smart move on YouTube's part to keep people interested in the site. YouTube doesn't care about you. YouTube cares about the person who's going to be sitting there watching 2 minutes of video, or would they rather have someone watching 20 minutes of video? Obviously, I think they're much, much more interested in that second person. And so to do that, they want to do everything they can to keep you on the site. And if they subscribe to you and they're not really interested in your videos anymore, I mean, it kind of makes sense that they're not going to be pushing them quite so hard. So I think that's something that a lot of people maybe understand, maybe don't. But I think a lot of the criticism you hear about YouTube is like, oh, the sub box is broken. When in reality, it's working pretty well. It's kind of working the way you intend, as long as your videos are being sort of interesting and engaging and people are continuously watching them.
Yeah, and also people who understand, because it didn't also, a few years ago, it would start on subscriptions, yes? Or at least on mobile? And then that
yes, it was definitely much more prevalent than it is today.
Yeah. And you know what's funny is I auto to the subscriptions tab because I don't want to say I'm a completionist, but I'm a check-in completionist. I want to know what was released and then decide if I'm watching it, and so I'm a completionist in that sense. So
right, same, absolutely. But I think people like us are rarer and rarer because I think so many people just hit that homepage. And when you think about it, and I know I'm going way off in the weeds here on YouTube algorithm stuff, but I love it. When you think about it, I see so much interesting and unique content from that homepage, right? So all kinds of people who make super interesting videos that I never heard of, but all of a sudden it just shows up and I'm like, hey, what's that? Click on it. Next thing I know, I'm 20 minutes down a rabbit hole of this person's videos. And I think that that's a really powerful thing. I think that's a really big driver of traffic to my own channel is people just randomly coming across some video that YouTube recommends. All of a sudden now they're watching 4 or 5 in a row, they're subscribed, and it's a really nice thing. So I think that it's easy to go to the sub feed, and I totally do it as well. But man, that the algorithm and YouTube, it's just so crazy just at how good it is and how smart it is at figuring out what to give you, when to give you, how often to give you, whatever video. It really is incredible. And I think that it just always really irks me when people are like, the YouTube sub box is broken. It sucks. It's terrible. I'm like, you guys have no idea how crazy cool all of what YouTube is doing for you is.
Yeah, though the trending tab has definitely turned me on to things that I haven't seen before, and I would have never found otherwise. That's for sure. That's not always a good thing, but sometimes it definitely is. That's
Absolutely.
for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, Austin, there's so many more things I wanted to talk about. You know, I mentioned a little bit about the Office Space, but, you know, I think we can kind of wind that in. Hey, knowing your neighbors with Jonathan's, I think cool enough to me. But I intentionally didn't bring up a few things because I've heard you talk about them ad nauseum. But for any folks who, for some reason, are just now hearing about Austin Evans, and maybe you're a fan of technology and YouTube and you're not checking him out, you need to do so and go through that back catalog. There's so many great stories and great reviews and great videos and products and so many different things to talk about. And I will just mention this in case you are that person. Go back and check out the fire event because that is a significant piece, I think, in practically YouTube history, at least in the technology YouTube history, because I think it sort of changed. It made people out of a lot of people who, you know, were just kind of presenters before. And I think it humanized the whole situation in a lot of ways. And like I said, I know you've told that story 100 times, but for anybody just coming across you, I want you to go back and kind of relive that event. So,
yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah. For sure. Austin, take a moment, if you would. Tell folks how they can go and check out you or follow you on the socials or whatever you want to tell people about.
Yeah, absolutely. So my YouTube channel is pretty simple. It's just Austin Evans. So you can find, that's definitely my sort of home base on the internet. That's where I upload all my videos and stuff. But, you know, I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and that's all Austin, not Duncan. So, yeah, go follow me on the things and the places and the stuff, I guess, if you want.
Yep.
Maybe.
Do it, folks. Links are in the show notes as always. So, Austin Evans, man, I've been watching you for literally hundreds of hours over the years, and it's been a privilege to talk to you.
Awesome, man. Hey, thank you so much for having me. Absolutely love it.
Most welcome, man. I heard somebody saying on one of your previous interviews you might be the nicest guy in tech/YouTube. And,
Not true.
I think that title might be yours, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
And that's it, folks. That'll do it for this week's show, episode 132. A huge episode. Mr. Austin Evans, my guest. What'd you guys think about that? Going behind the scenes of YouTube a little bit. What an amazing journey that guy's been on. And you definitely need to check out his work, especially if you're into tech at all. And don't forget what you heard up front, my brief conversation with Jonathan Goldstein, Gimlet Media's own and host of Heavyweight, who will be my guest next week on episode 133. He asked you to find out if you've got any story in your past about something unreconciled or something that you wish you could have done differently. He's willing to help jump in, and he wants to hear from you. Link in the show notes for that. If you enjoyed this show, please tell a friend about it, guys. The Podcast Digest is just getting started. I got so many great awesome things coming up for you in the not too distant future, mind you. If you did like the show, Patreon link in the show notes, folks. $1 a month goes a long way, and I would really appreciate your support as well. iTunes review on your platform of listening choice, all of it means a lot to me. And I also want to thank, one more time, this week's show sponsor, podbean.com/TPD. If you're thinking of starting a podcast or looking for a new home for your podcast, you get your first month free if you sign up with that special URL, so you can try all of Podbean's great hosting features. That's it for me for this week. Hope you guys enjoyed. Really want to hear what you think about this episode. Tried a lot of new things. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. And for the Podcast Digest, my name's Dan Lizette, and I'll talk to you next week.